Hi, everyone. I can see that people are starting to join, and we'll give everybody a few more seconds to join, and then we'll get started. Welcome. Awesome. So I think we're gonna get things started now that I've seen more people have joined. Welcome to a day in the life of a user experience researcher. We are really excited to have this event, and thank you everybody for joining. Thank you especially to Adobe, our partner in this event, and our panelists who we'll be hearing from today. We're really excited to have them with us today. And a little bit of background of Latinas in Tech. If this is your first event that you are joining, our vision is a tech industry where Latinas are well represented throughout all levels of the ecosystem by empowering them to be innovators and leaders. And our mission is to provide resources to the community, opportunities for them to thrive, innovate, and lead in tech. If you are not a member, feel free to register. Also, we have an ally section as part of our membership, and it's free to join. So, if you want to be a part of it and help us see more women in tech, come on board. And just an event reminder throughout the panel, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the QA portion of Zoom, and we'll have 15 minutes towards the end to kind of answer those questions. All right, so here are our panelists today. We're really excited to have them all join, a wide range of user researchers at Adobe, and I'll start the event by kicking it off. So I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll hear from them and their background.
All right, so I can kick off with my background. I'm Karina. I am a UX researcher, of course, with Adobe. I'm based in Colorado. I grew up in San Francisco, and I am a Latina myself. And I had quite an interesting path into UX research, since initially I was pretty firm in never wanting to work in tech. So growing up in San Francisco, I had kind of seen the downside of the impacts of gentrification brought on by the growth of the tech companies in the Bay Area, and especially seeing the impacts it had on neighborhoods that were near and dear to me, like the Mission, which is predominantly a Latin neighborhood, was hard. It was just, to me, I saw it as this, evil place, and also didn't realize that there was careers within tech that were actually geared towards helping people. I just kind of saw it as this like greedy, bunch of developers. So that is kind of the mindset that I had of the tech world before learning more. And I majored in psychology, knowing that I wanted a job helping people. And after finishing my degree, I worked a variety of jobs: a barista, a nanny, going into then different mental health tech positions, so aides, so pretty low level. And it was there during those jobs I saw the impact of poorly designed systems. So seeing doctors and nurses and therapists like losing their mind trying to figure out how to do something in the documentation systems, or figure out why it's not working, was definitely a big eye opener for me, because I had previously seen design as like this pretty thing, not really understanding how it can impact someone's day to day, especially if they don't work in tech. So that kind of sparked a new idea for me for a potential new career path, since I was already kind of wanting to step away from mental health and healthcare. So I was like, what jobs are out there to help people that use software? And so I Googled what jobs are there to help people use software, and that's when I discovered UX. And it just so happened that General Assembly was opening up their first campus in Denver, down the street from my apartment. and they did UX, or they offered a course in it. And so looking into that, I just decided, like, I'm going to do it. Joined the first cohort. It was an exciting and scary experience because, you know, I didn't really know. I hope I can get a job after, but it was still, you know, a little scary. And I will say it was actually a bit of a tough path landing my first job afterwards. But through a ton of networking and just practicing what I've learned, eventually was able to get an internship and then a contract position and then a full-time position. So that's kind of just a brief overview of how I ended up in UX research.
Thank you, Karina.
Laurel. Oh yeah.
So hi, I'm Laurel. Thanks, Karina. It's funny because a lot of what you say is resonates with some of my experience as well. But you know, I actually had a pretty circuitous path to landing on UX, and I'll say that the consistent theme, though, that has always driven things that I do is just an interest in humans and their needs, their behaviors, in the interest of, you know, serving in some way or creating products or experiences that somehow make things better. So I did study in psychology as well. And I knew I wanted to work in an applied setting right after that. So I was working in a behavioral treatment program, a residential treatment program, and using some skills there. And then I knew I wanted to make a change, but wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. So I was actually looking at graduate programs in public health, in education, Peace Corps, all kinds of things. And I ended up moving towards the education direction, not knowing where that would take me. And it actually got me a job with a company that publishes and manufactures educational products for the classroom. So I got a role there where I was doing experimental design research. So I was looking at school districts across the country, working with teachers and kids that were using the products and seeing what kind of learning gains they had compared to kids that weren't using the products. It was learning to read type of products. And it was actually when I was boots on the ground that I saw teachers trying to use our products, kids trying to use our products, and really getting frustrated. I mean, some of it was seamless, but there were definitely some parts that no one had really taken a look at what it was really like, and it wasn't really user-centered in its design. And not to date myself, this UX was a pretty young, it was a young industry back then. So it wasn't even like clear to me that this was a thing, but it was a clear opportunity for the company to invest in this area and spend some more time with users as products were being developed. So me and a few other people at the company developed this kid lab where we could do usability research there. And we eventually went outside of the lab as well. And that's where I really grew to love UX research. And since then, I have had the opportunity to go into other areas that are also of interest to me besides education, such as travel. I've worked at TripAdvisor. And then creativity has always been something that's interesting to me too. So I worked at a bookmaking platform and now at Adobe. So it's nice to be able to merge your interest in humans and understanding humans in the context of other things that you're interested in. So that was my path. And I will pass it off to Lindsay.
Hello, thanks so much for having us today. So happy to be here. So yes, my name is Lindsay. I am a senior UX researcher at Adobe. I've been in insights types roles for over a decade. I will say that I fell into research in a happy accident. So out of undergrad, you know, my parents wanted me to be an accountant. I wanted to be a psychologist. There was a lot of infighting, and I thought that corporate research was kind of this happy medium, this intersection of business, but at the same time still being able to understand how people work. I think that you'll find that's a kind of a common thread and interest among all of us, is really trying to just understand like how people think and how they do, you know, what they do, how they do what they do, and why they want to do what they do. So out of undergrad, I joined Unilever on their product insights team after an internship. That's kind of where I got my insights crash course. So I was working in skin cleansing category. So I was working on brands like Dove, Caress and Lux, a lot of work around skin cleansing and showering. So I know a lot about showering. It's a very weird niche place to be. You know, I was doing a lot of work around sensory and packaging. I did a brief stint in brand management while I was at Unilever, and after going through that rotation, I realized that I didn't really want a job that was going to be led by business metrics, that I wanted the user truth really to be at the core of what I do. And that's what made me decide to go full into insights. And I looked at graduate programs in market research. I went to the University of Wisconsin, Madison. They have a market research MBA specialization program. And it was once I was there, I quickly realized that market research and product research are different. I didn't know that until I was in the program. I had assumed I was doing market research. That's what generally my team had been calling it, but they are, while there is tons of overlap, there are also differences, particularly in the types of research you're doing, the types of questions that you're investigating. So it was through there that, I started getting into tech. So I was consulting, working for an agency to pay the bills. I was also doing academic research in graduate school to also pay the bills. I was very busy. So it was, it was a really great time in my life where I was kind of experimenting with kind of different research in different industries. And then really starting to get a feel for, for technology and really loving that. And it was through that program I found my way to Adobe, where I did market research, and then found my way into the UX research field a couple of years ago, where I found that just being able to work on the product is really what gave me joy. So I guess that's kind of what motivated me to get into UX research overall, is I love just seeing the tangible impact that my work has, in the way that people experience these things. I mean, technology is part of our everyday lives, and it's only becoming more and more important. So we need to understand these interactions. And yeah, it's not just about what you can see. I love also the fact that sometimes our work is invisible too. The fact that we can provide a frictionless, painless experience. Sometimes our goal is to have, you never know that we're there, right? And there's joy in that as well. So that's a little bit about my story, and I'm going to pass it on to Omena.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you, and thank you for having us. So my background is slightly different. So I actually come from a fashion and journalism background. So most recently I was working with a magazine, and I actually decided to pivot into UX design last year, but I'll start at the beginning of the story. So I studied fashion and journalism at London College of Fashion. And for most of my career, I've been working with different magazines and different newspapers. And most recently, I was working with In Style magazine. And within the magazine, we actually had a franchise called Badass Women, where I had the opportunity to interview a number of female founders of different apps. And I was just really intrigued. So every time I would speak to them, they would tell me about UX designing, how they had, created this app and the whole process they had been through. And I just found myself very intrigued by it. And sometimes when there were products that weren't doing particularly well, I found myself always wondering, okay, what could they be doing better? Where have they missed the mark? Why don't our readers know about this product? So last year, when I was quarantined, I thought, okay, this is like the perfect opportunity to study. And I had kind of been thinking about pivoting out of journalism, and UX design was something that I was really interested in. And it's something that I felt that I could use my research skills from journalism in, and it would be not necessarily an easy pivot, but something that I would be able to pick up. So I decided to apply to different reputable courses. And I saw a number of you in the chat actually said that you went to General Assembly. So I actually applied to General Assembly. And they basically put me forward for something called Adobe Digital Academy. And that's basically a program for career changers and people from marginalized societies like myself, like women, and people who basically want to change into a different career. So I was put forward for this scholarship with Adobe, and fortunately I got the scholarships and they covered the cost of the course. And it's basically a boot camp where you're learning about UX design and research. So you're learning the whole process, and after you have the opportunity to apply for an internship with Adobe. So fortunately, after I completed the program, I applied for an internship with Adobe, which I successfully got. And recently I was converted into a full-time role. So that's how I'm here today. So at the moment, I'm working in the UX research department with Lightroom.
Thank you, Amina. I'll hand it off to Wilson.
Hi, everyone. So my path is much more straightforward. I've been in this field for well over 20 years. I started out as a computer science major in college. And after my first internship, quickly realized that I did not want to be in the cubicle programming, making cell phone infrastructure, server stuff. And so I was talking to my RA, and she introduced me to this field called HCI, which was a major that Carnegie Mellon had at the time, where it was combining computer science, psychology, and design together, where you can learn to kind of build better software for people. And that was really intriguing. So I started taking some course and went on and got the master's in the HCI program at Carnegie Mellon. And after school, just landed, very fortunately landed a job at Adobe, because it was right around when the dot-com crashed. I was at Adobe for 9 years, and then I decided to go to work at YouTube and at Twitter. And then about 4 years ago, I found my way back here at Adobe. I loved Adobe so much. I've always loved working with creators, working with designers. And so even when I was at YouTube, I was studying creators, looking at people who are making videos. And so I'm glad to be back at Adobe for 20 years. And I'll hand it off to Liz to wrap up this question for us.
Hey, I'm Liz. Glad to be here. I studied international relations and gender studies in college, so it doesn't really, maybe it might not make immediate sense, but when I look back at my route here, you see that I've always been interested in institutions and organizations and power and how people work in there. And I went to grad school I did a PhD in cultural anthropology, and I was looking at the relationship between technology and society, and specifically in the formalization of elder care in Turkey, because when you do a PhD, you do things very specifically. And I really loved research, really interested in humans. I love doing interviews, learning new things. But one thing that I wasn't so happy with my academic research was just like working alone and having it's like you write a book, it takes 5 years. And while I was writing up my dissertation, I had the opportunity to do some contracting work, working on kind of digital solutions for businesses, where you have these complex institutions, you have all these different kinds of roles who have different needs, and they need to kind of come together in one digital product and do something. And that was really interesting for me. It kind of gave me an opportunity to, use my perspective on organizations and people. So at first, I was working not in UX, but a kind of like relative adjacent area. And then I got interested in UX and I did like an online certification and did some kind of pro bono projects, and got into the exciting world of complex enterprise software.
Thank you, everybody, for those great stories and everyone's background. It's very inspiring to see all the different paths you've taken. I guess to get a little bit more into what user experience research is, what type of studies do you run? What methodologies do you have? And maybe provide some examples of those for the audience here who's interested in learning a little bit more about the work you do.
Yeah, I can start with this one. I would generally segment maybe types of research into like qualitative and quantitative. So our team covers both, although a lot of UX research is heavily anchored in qualitative research, but quantitative research being like surveying, modeling, things of that sort. Qualitative research being things like interviewing people, observation, so taking a step back and watching people in their natural context. I've done methodologies like co-design workshops, where we're bringing in users and we're also bringing in members of the Adobe team, and we're designing products together from the ground up. Longitudinal studies where you have a prototype or a product and you're putting out into the world to see how people are able to like onboard to it over time. I'm hugely oversimplifying here, but I could say that quantitative is more like the what and the how questions, and the qualitative is the why questions, that to build that context so that we really, it's going really deep. A lot of the work that we do, it's not as easy as usually just doing a qual piece of research or a quant piece of research. I find that the best pieces of research are ones that combine this kind of aspect of, what people say they do versus what they actually do. So oftentimes it's a mixture of interviewing. So it's like, because it's still important to understand what people think is happening, what is relevant to them on top, what is top of mind. But then we'll also ask them to do tasks for us or have them take us through technology, and we'll watch what they do. And often these things are in conflict, and that's important to understand as well. So, there's a good marriage there between the see and the do, marriage between qualitative and quantitative. Oftentimes we're kind of mix and matching and Frankensteining things together as we need to in corporate research. Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, I know I work a lot with the user research team at Adobe as a designer, and all of the work you do is really impressive. Thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to? Cool. So I'll move on to the next question. What are some of the weirdest and coolest studies you've gotten to run? Tara or Laurel, whoever would like to jump in with that one. I'm interested to hear the.
I'll jump in on this one. Yeah, so back when I worked at the company that did manufacturing of educational products for kids, there was some products they made for schools, but they also had consumer products for kids. And there was this team called the Advanced Concept Team, and their role was to think in the future of what direction should we be heading in for future products that we should be starting to develop now. And there started to be this energy around some kind of product to be defined that related to how kids interact or something in the social sphere. So think maybe something like a kid's messenger. And this is, well, not necessarily that, because it didn't exist yet, but it could be something like that. And this was well before, Facebook even forayed into that space. So it was kind of a new space. So there was some energy gathering around this. And then, some people like me and a couple others were like, we don't really know that much about the space. Like maybe we want to do some research into this. And we were granted a 3-week window to compress some research in really quickly. So we spun up a study. I recruited a lot of other people to help me with the going into people's homes. We recruited families. We made sure they didn't know what company we represented because we didn't want to bias anything. They welcomed us into their homes. We got to see like where the children played and sat down and did interviews with both parents and kids and talked to them about, we have the questions were like, what are their social spheres? Who are they interacting with? Where does technology enter? Where does it not? Why? How does it benefit the interaction or not? And those are all the kinds of things we were seeking to answer. So we interviewed parents and kids and had this little sort of arts and crafts type of activity so we could have them sort of depicting their social life and their spheres of who they were interacting with and what they were doing. And it was really interesting. And one thing is we uncovered a lot of opportunities that we didn't expect. It was really great in that sense. But on the other hand, the biggest takeaway from the research that we did, it was really loud and clear that parents weren't really interested in a product like this. I just kept hearing over and over again, kids are just learning how to be social beings. So like they're learning how to make eye contact, wait their turn, all those kinds of things. And to introduce technology to mediate that, there was the perception, true or not, that might interfere. So sometimes research has a role to explore new spaces, uncover opportunities, but also sometimes it's to assess risk to a company. And I think in this case, like we decided, given what we saw, that it really wasn't the right product, because parents ultimately are making the decision for a kid product. So sometimes the role of research is to actually kill an idea that somebody has put forth, if it's going to pose a risk or it's not something people want or need. So that was my interesting example. And I'm interested in hearing from my colleagues what other interesting, strange studies they've done.
I've certainly killed many product ideas in my life. The coolest one is definitely ones that involve doing research of international users. It's always been interesting traveling to different countries to learn about kind of how other users in other countries use your product. A lot of times the products are developed in the US or in the Bay Area, and the team often have assumptions about how users in other countries work, and they don't, oftentimes they don't know, they just assume that everyone is just like them. And just being able to take the team to other countries and to show them how other users are using their product, and the different assumptions that they've been making have been wrong is definitely eye-opening. Weirdest study, I don't know how much I can talk about this, but I mean, I did studies where I talked to internet trolls as part of the research I've done when I was working for a social media company. And definitely is eye-opening, is not the type of people that you would think. And you really need to be very empathic and be able to remain neutral as you're interviewing these users. Lindsay, I know you have some fun ones since you talked about showering.
I do. Yeah, so I think I've touched on this a little bit, but you know, research, you know, throughout different industries overlaps a lot. So some of my more interesting ones were when I was at Unilever. One study that I ran, I had to develop a new methodology actually. So they had a new type of packaging for a body wash. And they wanted to, they were hoping that this new package would help users save water in the shower. It's supposed to be like an eco savings. So I had to develop a study that broke down all the different stages of the shower to try to prove that this, you know, that compared to a standard body wash, this new package would save water. So we had a central location. I had to essentially, I recruited this wonderful girl to come in. I had to create training videos on how to shower. And I had to train people how to shower in this new methodology in order to be able to like time people. There was a whole setup involved. So I had this girl come in, and of course she's wearing a bathing suit, but we have this giant shower, and like we had to like videotape her showering and walking through the steps, and she was a great sport about it. She said it's not the weirdest study she's actually ever done, which is, I think, really funny. So basically, once we had that training video, we recruited folks and we trained them on how to shower. And then we tested them with the prototype and the standard control, and it was randomized. And you know, after calibrating all the showers, because there was like multiple showers in this location, we were able to tell actually that we were wasting water. So that was a fun one, talking about killing ideas. So that was so that one was a really interesting study. But then getting to the international element that Wilson was talking about, another issue with this product is it was built based off of US showers, and in Japanese markets, the shower environment, first of all, is much colder. So things had to, you know, you had to do all sorts of stability tests because it was much colder than it is in our showers. But also they didn't have the same kind of shelving that we did in ours. So like this package that we created, you know, they had to like put on the floor. It was awkward. You had to like you're trying to use two hands to like get this, you know, all this cleanser out, and it's not working. So it goes to show again, international research is really important. So that's my story. I am gonna pass it to Omena.
So my most fun study, actually, I think, you know, the study that I'm actually currently working on, it's not weird or wacky like any of the others, but I'm currently working on a study with Figma users. So I'm comparing Figma to XD and really trying to find out from these Figma users, you know, what do they like about Figma? What motivated them to use Figma in comparison to other products? You know, what are their behaviors, what are their goals, what are their pain points about Figma? And I'm actually really enjoying it because during my time at General Assembly, I actually studied with Figma. So it was the product that I was using to design interfaces and products. So it's really nice to just hear from these users, you know, what they really love about the product. Sorry, not a weird story, unfortunately, but it's something that I'm enjoying at the moment.
Thank you all for sharing those, especially the shower one, Lindsay. It's an interesting study, I'm sure.
So I think on to the next question in regards to learning about the skills that you may need as a user researcher, what other skills might be useful as part of your role in this? And Omina, I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, I would say for myself, there's a number of skills. One of them would be curiosity about people and their problems, and just a desire to understand users, clients, and stakeholders, what people really need, what they really want from a product, and what their problems are. I think empathy is another one, and I think that's really key to understanding people and their needs. And I think it enables us as UX researchers to be more observant and to ask the right questions and to really discover deeper insights. Another one that I might say is maybe pragmatism. Like, although UX researchers are considering the users and their needs, you also have to consider the business needs and to find solutions that satisfy both the business goals and the user goals. So you have to really be pragmatic in that area. And sorry, I'm trying to think. And other ones I would say is maybe persuasiveness. So you really having to evangelize the importance of research, and you really want the stakeholders to consider the importance of your research and your findings and implement it into the product. And that also comes with another skill that I think is important to have, which is storytelling. So you're really trying to tell the stakeholders the findings that you found, and some of them may not have been at the interviews that you were doing, or they may not have been observing when you're doing user testing and things like that. So it's important that you're able to tell the story, of the user. And I think another one might be the ability to learn quickly. So during my time at Adobe, I've worked on a few different products, and I think it's really important to be able to pick up how those products work and really understand the team and really understand their goals.
Thank you. And I'm sure from like previous as a career changer, you brought up a lot of those skills from those past experiences. Awesome. Does anybody else have anything to add?
In general, and I'm sure this is kind of covered on, but just people skills. So, being a good listener, knowing when to not say anything, and really, give space for others to speak. And that is true, I think, both when working with stakeholders and users. You want to create an environment where people feel heard and comfortable, and building rapport, excuse me, is a key to that. So just, through empathy, through active listening, and then kind of just knowing when to be quiet is a big one. It can be so tempting just to start, rapid fire shooting these questions. You get so curious, they say something and you're like, oh my God, like, let's go more into this. So just for moderation, a lot of it is just soft skills.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. For the relationship building from the stakeholder side, a lot of that can take the form in, some of it is just, building relationships with people, which is harder to do when we're all remote, but it's really an important piece. But also just actions or doing things like, talking to your stakeholders before you spin up your test plan, including them in the test plan, having transparency and involvement along every step of the way. At least, different stakeholders may have more or less time to engage with every piece along the way, but invite them for the ride, and then you tend to have, more shared ownership of the whole process and then the findings, which also will translate to a bigger impact as well.
And also just keep in mind that each team is different. So you might have to just do a little bit of legwork up front to kind of understand what works well for your team in terms of communication method or engagement method.
All great skills. Thank you. And I've seen them as I work with user researchers at Adobe and Play, and they definitely, the listening part I've seen has become key. Great. So I guess, like, in terms of resources, if somebody wants to get into user experience research, what resources should they look at to learn more? What common user research terminology should they look out for? in this, and as they start to look into this?
Yeah, I could take that one. There are really just so many possibilities for resources. So I'm going to answer the question, but my first recommendation is just remember that whatever, especially if you're a career changer or you're coming from, you've done something in your life other than UX research, you're coming with skills and a perspective. So there are tons of resources out there that are created just by people who have just pivoted, or who that kind of like make it seem super scary. And I know that when I was transitioning, I read those resources and I was like, oh, I'm never going to get in. It's like super hard. And there's all these things I don't know. So just like when you're reading these resources, remember that that you're bringing up what your job reading these resources is to see like, what is this world like? And like, what can I bring to it? Rather than like, what are all the things that I need to know? That was helpful for me. And I think it's been helpful for some others too. But there are tons of things to read. So you can join Slack communities. One that I'm in is Ethnography Hangout. There are also several others. Maybe I can provide a list afterwards. A book that was really helpful for me was Just Enough Research by Erica Hall, which really kind of describes how to kind of surf the chaos of a product environment, and just provide just enough of what people need. But, as a person who learns through working with people, what was most helpful for me was like going to meetups like this one, asking people for coffees, and understanding, other people's paths, because just to bring it full circle, it's really about like, what can you add to who you already are from the resources, rather than like, for me, it wasn't helpful to think of it as like, filling gaps, because if you're curious in this line of work, you have something to bring to it.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the importance of talking to folks. I definitely wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't ask people out for coffee or drinks, pretty consistently as I was going through the program. And, sometimes I think that it's kind of, and I don't know if I'm kind of jumping into the next question of like looking into, how to get a job, but I just want to emphasize the importance of networking. To get your foot in the door, at a company, it's really helpful. But again, to get a better picture of like what the day-to-day is, and really, spending time to figure out like if it's a right fit for you or not. So just jumping in with the importance of networking as a resource.
And Daniela, the question was about like resources and terminology, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so like, I echo everything that everyone has said already, thinking about maybe some like practical language for folks that are trying to use, Google to find resources. Wilson was talking about human-computer interaction. There's a lot of programs that are spinning up around that specifically, that covers like the interaction of literally humans and computers. I think it says it in the name. I know there's a couple people on our team who have backgrounds in human factors engineering as well. That's just some common terminology that I've heard utilized. Anthropology as well. A lot of folks come from, I think, anthropology backgrounds, because it's about immersing yourself in culture. And this is, again, culture and technology intersections. So those are also some good resources to look into. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for those resources, especially the terminology. And to what are some things that you've learned over time that are important for user experience research, especially if you want to get into it, if you want to look for a job in that field? Karina, I'll pass it off to you.
So yeah, I think I got excited and started jumping in there. But yeah, I think also when you think about asking folks in the industry, again, these days it's might be more of a Zoom compared to coffee, but it's almost a good way where you can start practicing, you know, research skills. So before you're going to do that kind of call, you know, you want to understand, like, what is the goal? What do I want to learn from this person? What are my questions? So, you know, with that being said, learning how to ask questions in a non-biased way is definitely a very important skill that, you know, is developed over time. And yeah, I'll pass it off to Laurel.
Well, we were talking about this the other day, and the idea came up about trying not to do too much, and everyone was like, oh yeah, that's a big one. Because oftentimes your stakeholders come to you with so many questions, and they're really good questions. They're interesting questions. You want to know, so you want to just pack them all in, and you may have an hour to interview someone, and you just can't fit it all in. And in fact, if you try, it can actually be detrimental. You're going to just kind of, you know, attenuate like what you're learning. It's going to lessen your impact. You really need to constrain, like get alignment with your stakeholders, or what are the key questions, and constrain your studies to that so you can focus on it and really get some rich information. And that's a hard thing to do, that I think is a constant battle. You learn over time that it's the right thing to do, is to focus, but there's always going to be some tension there.
And that happens on the other side as well of what Laura was talking about. Like sometimes I remember in the beginning when I was just starting out, like you want to pack everything into your report, and then you realize that like that muddied the message that the key message that you wanted to tell your stakeholders. And so I watched Project Runway, as Tim Gunn would say, like edit, edit, edit. Like I think you really want to kind of figure out what your key message is and nail that.
That's totally true. It's part of the storytelling element and deciding like what do you want people to walk away with, and you inevitably have a lot more rich information, and that's what the appendix is for.
One thing that I've learned over time that's been really helpful is just shifting from the mindset I had in the academic world, which is like, you need to know everything and it all needs to be perfect, to like shifting into a mindset of like, oh, actually nobody that I'm working with knows what's going on here. And we're all gonna just ride this and do it anyway and do our best. And that's enough. And there are gonna be problems that we're gonna learn from them, and we're gonna talk about them. So that mindset shift has been really important.
Something that I've learned along the way, when I was more of a junior researcher and I developed a research plan with my team, I was like, I wanted to make sure that thing carried through. Like we chose an audience, like we want to talk to this type of user, and we expect them to have this type of motivation. What I would find sometimes is about halfway through the research, we realize we're talking to the wrong audience, or we actually need to be talking to a secondary audience, because we actually found out that there is actually two motivations that matter, not just one. And then you have to kind of go back to your team and be like, okay, this is going to take longer, but this is why. And being a lot more comfortable in that, I set expectations now up front, you know, they're like, okay, so we're going to focus on this type of person. I'm like, yep, but we may find along the way that, you know, we actually need to be talking to all these other people, and that is totally okay. We're going through this process together. This is, you know, as Laurel said, it's really important to have them along for the ride from start to finish, these stakeholders. So if they're hearing it from the users themselves and we're debriefing after sessions, when we're doing interviews, it's like, okay, you guys heard them say X, Y, and Z. This is telling me that there's something really interesting here that we didn't know about, and we have to explore it, you know, otherwise we're going to be making a mistake. So being open to change throughout the process is something I've learned.
Thank you so much for those tips. We're going to transition to Q&A, and there's actually a question related to having to work with stakeholders and the user research findings that you need to share by Maribel. So I'll go ahead and post this for the panel. But for Maribel, she asks, do you have an example of when you presented user experience research findings or recommendations to a stakeholder at your company, but they end up making a product decision that's not informed by user research? If so, what happened next?
I think that's a tough one, and I'm sure it's happened to everybody. I think the best you can do, I mean, what happens next, I think it's the focus is more on what can you do to prevent that from happening in the first place. It may happen anyway because you're not in control of everything, but it's really that bringing people along, inviting people to user interviews, making a report that can carry the biggest impact, and like that's your opportunity to have your influence, and those are the places where you have the greatest amount of opportunity to influence your stakeholders. They have other factors that may be influencing, and they'll make the decision they do. And sometimes you just have to accept that. You can try to keep surfacing your research, but it may be a moot point in some cases after the fact. But I'm curious if other people have thoughts on this one.
I have seen it happen. I've seen research that has indicated we're not ready to move forward. There's a lot of red flags and we don't have enough features in the product to really be a true MVP that'll like really satisfy these users in their workflows. And we launched the product, and you know, the media can be mean. So I think that, you know, that's there was a lesson learned there. And yeah, you know, for a lot of folks who wanted to jump ahead. So yes, I would love to say, I know this is the thing, those who are in product management and other roles, there's 1,000 things that they have to juggle, right? You know, I told you I did a brief stint in brand management, you know, and which, you know, there are some similarities to product management. You're looking at, you know, all the engineering resources, you have to look at the research, you have to look at the timelines, you try to be first to market. There's 1,000 things going on, right? It's a very hard job. But the earlier that research is in the mix, like from the project start, that will not happen. When research is brought in at the end as a way to just validate something, and then you get those red flags, that's harder to right the ship. When it is built into the project from the start, then those situations are less likely to happen.
And I think at least a lot of my early opportunities in UXR were in environments where they knew they wanted research, but that groundwork hadn't been built. And so a lot of the recommendations that I gave like were not listened to because there was no infrastructure. We were kind of like in there too late, or I was in there too late. And one thing that I've taken away from that is even, you know, it's about like building relationships going forward. So if no product direction was really changed based on your research, but the next time you got it a little bit earlier, I mean, it sounds sad, but that can be a huge win in some environments. And I think that's what a lot of UXR is like.
Liz, your point reminds me of like there are times where we turn away projects. There are times we turn away projects when we realize that we won't be able to make the impact because they don't have time. If a product team doesn't have time to address particular problems that we might identify. So there are definitely times where we decide that like, hey, this is not the best time to engage us in like earlier in the process next time.
Thank you so much for that, for answering Maribel's question. And I guess in terms of like, before you get into working in UX research, what advice do you have for someone who wants to become a user experience researcher?
I'll take that one. I think everyone kind of mentioned like definitely network with other UXRs. I mean, attend events like this one. There are tons of UXRs on platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter. And there might already, if there's already a UX function within your company, see if there are ways you can shadow the researchers or help out in one of the research projects there. There are definitely many kind of avenues to get in. And I think it was Liz that mentioned about, I think the tent of UXR has gone much broader than it was when I started like 20 years ago. When I started 20 years ago, it was a lot that it was like, you have to have an HCI degree or you have to have a psychology degree. And now I feel like there are definitely many people coming from many disciplines. People were switching career, joining UX, and that's really exciting to see.
And I think, sorry. No, I was going to say, just adding on to what Wilson said, as someone who has switched career, I can really testify to the importance of networking. I remember at the beginning, whilst I was studying, I literally thought to myself, okay, which companies would I like to work for? And I just started adding all these random people on LinkedIn and asking them if they were available for a coffee chat. And I found that, everyone was really open to me and they were happy to speak about their career and what they were doing. But, I just really wanted to understand more about their day-to-day, if this was an area that I definitely wanted to pivot into, what they liked about their company. And it was just great. And, I come from, as I said, a fashion and media background where it can be very pretentious. But I generally found, within UX research, the designers and the researchers were extremely friendly. They didn't know me. I had literally just messaged them on LinkedIn and they were more than happy to speak to me. So I would definitely recommend that. And also, sorry, I actually saw in the chat, someone said that, for where they were very advanced in their career. So they don't know if they could do an internship at this point. Even for me, I was advanced in journalism, but I really wanted to pivot into UX. And the experience that I've gained at Adobe in doing the internship has been invaluable. It's not like an internship where you're making the cups of coffee and fetching the printing from the printer and stuff like that. It's very hands-on. You're conducting your own studies. You're speaking with stakeholders, you're speaking with users, you're conducting interviews, so you do learn a lot in the process.
Yeah, I want to add on to what everyone has said. I think that, through this question and the previous question, we talked about like things that are important to get into UXR. So like doing your education, we talked about resources and terminology, networking, we talked about that, internships. But there are a few other avenues that I've also recommended to people in the past. I find that that contracting roles are kind of like the internships for career switchers sometimes. Sometimes there's programs built for career switchers that allow internships, but other times they're not. So I know a lot of people that have pivoted to UX by looking at like 6-month contracting roles. And essentially that's kind of the same thing as an internship. So you can look out for that as well on LinkedIn and those kinds of openings. It's not just about, academic education. So yeah, we talked about different courses and things that you can look at, and that's really important. But it's also just about gaining experience and building up your portfolio. Something I've also recommended is pro bono work. So like there's companies like Taproot out there that volunteers your skills. And there's other companies like that where you can go and for nonprofits, just volunteer time to doing a doing UX research and build up your portfolio that way. Or family and friends, asking them if they need work and doing something like that. And then another option that I've also recommended to folks is joining an agency. So sometimes I found that jumping right into like the client side, like the Adobes and the Unilevers of the world can be a little bit more difficult because they expect you to apply those insights, pretty immediately. Where the agency side of things, so companies like Ipsos, Kantar, GfK, they often take career switchers or people right out of like undergrad, and you can really build up your methodology chops at those types of places, learning how to do screeners and discussion guides, surveys, all of that good stuff. So I've recommended that route too. So I've seen people switch from agency and then to client. So there's kind of a few different entry points that you can look for.
Yeah, and one more thing too is there are some good recruitment agencies out there. I think sometimes third-party recruiters get a bad rep, and there are definitely agencies that you probably wouldn't want to work with, but through networking, I actually did get connected with a fantastic recruiter. And again, by maintaining that relationship, he was well aware of, kind of my background. I'm looking for that first role. And since I was just in the back of his mind, when an opportunity came up, he knew that I could be a good fit. And that's actually how I got my first contract position. So definitely if you come across recruiters who seem interested in really learning like your skill set and what you're looking for, they could be a great avenue into finding that right fit for a first job.
Thank you, everybody. Oh,
Oh, yeah, I just have one thing which was helpful for me. At first, I was like, I'm just going to look for a new job and it's going to be, I'll just do anything. And so when recruiters asked me, what do you want to do? And I was like, anything, right? But that's actually not very, doesn't sound very appealing. So actually narrowing down what I thought was most interesting and where I could make the best contribution, which I was able to do through coffee chats and through research to really see what's out there and where might I fit. Actually kind of narrowing down, I had a lot more success.
Thank you all for those tips. We do have a question, and I know we're nearing the end. So it's about General Assembly and UX boot camps. Can you provide more information about the UX Design Immersive, but also other boot camps that you may recommend? And then I'll probably limit that to if somebody wants to jump in on that, and then I can provide other resources that the team has for everybody.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. So as I mentioned, I did the UX Design Immersive, and I'm not going to lie, I can it's intense. Like, I think I've said to Lindsay like so many times that it's really intense. You can't work full time, or literally maybe can't even work whilst you're doing the course. It's 9 to 5 every day. It's for 3 months. As I mentioned, you're learning the research side and you are learning the design side. But on top of that, you're required to do these projects in about 2-week sprints. So you're literally working, you're working long hours every day, and there's very short deadlines. In the end, it's definitely worth it. You have this portfolio and you have this work to show, and it's great for career changers who maybe can't afford to take, a whole year off, but they do want to do something different. But yes, I would like to tell you before that it's a lot of work, a lot of hard work.
Thank you, and it pays off. So we do have, in terms of the team here, they are also interested in running research. So that we'll be posting a link if you want to see, how research is run and you want to participate in these sessions. We'll have a form for that. And also, I'll let Lindsay speak to this, but they're offering coffee chats. So as they've mentioned, how important it is to reach out, to network, and to talk to UXR team members. I'll let Lindsay explain it a little bit more, but I'll also post a link to that on the chat. Oh, I think Tatiana did already. Thanks.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, so the first link is a link to our research program. We highly recommend that you sign up and get directly involved in research. That's a great way to also understand UX research, is to literally be a part of it from the other side. So please do that. We are always looking for people, for new participants, and it's compensated. Throwing that out there. And then the second link is to a forum for coffee chats. I think we've said the word coffee chats or the phrase coffee chats like 15 times just in the past hour. And so, our team on Adobe Design Research and Strategy wants to do is for those of you that are interested in user research as a career path. So UX research specifically, we want to be able to offer coffee chats with folks on our team, to give you any, personal information, one-on-one information that you may have. It was just, as everyone mentioned, really important, and to us in different parts of our life. Even for me, transitioning from market research to UX research, I didn't know what the difference was, and people have been just so open, and we wanted to be able to pass that on to all of you. So please sign up if you're interested. We are limiting it to folks who are just interested in user research. I know there are some folks on here who wanted to be better partners to user researchers, and that's great. We can provide resources, for different job openings, for example, for design and things like for designers and things like that. But the coffee chats are for those who are interested in the user research field. And yeah, we'll be happy to talk to you.
Thank you all so much. We are at time, but I do want to thank the panelists for providing all this knowledge, especially with all the wide range backgrounds that you all bring to your roles. And I'm so lucky to have you work with because I could not do my job as a designer if I didn't have the research. And thank you all to all the attendees for joining. I hope you enjoyed the panel. I did, and I learned some things too. And we'll be sending out these links in a thank you email as well. So thank you all so much. Bye. Have a good night or good afternoon.